If you are just joining us in the high school section of this webinar, students who are deaf or hard of hearing will be referred to as students, unless otherwise noted when compared to those who are hearing. As students move from freshman to senior years, there is a significant social development, including self-identity, self-acceptance, and social growth. High school students and young adults, such as those launching into the workforce or post-secondary education or training, need to prepare for changes in friends, including those at the workplace, as well as in personal life. At the start of high school, many students just want to look the same as other teens, with little or no interest in using hearing assistive technology, superficial friendships, and may struggle to develop a deeper understanding of levels of friendships, including making connections with role models and other similar experiences. Struggles to make connections in the absence of teacher support and instruction, as well as understanding the nuances of different types of connections, will be shared. Also, as high school students launch, they will meet many new people and have to navigate without the support of school and family members in the workplace and college settings. This includes many introductions, determining when and how to disclose hearing levels and the impact, as well as the use of humor to make people comfortable communicating with them. When surveying adults with lived experiences, many share that the burden for initiating friendships, especially for those who may use sign language interpreter services, falls on the person who is deaf or hard of hearing. This is a shift for young adults. Finally, social communication evolves into identifying communication and social allies who are people who might be particularly supportive or understanding.
When you think back to when you were a freshman, what was it like being a deaf student in a school with many hearing students and only 3 other deaf students?
Well, that was really a crazy feeling. It was a new experience for me. At that time, I had not found my deaf identity yet, and I was trying to fit in. I also had not started advocating for my own access and felt embarrassed to have an interpreter follow me around.
What were some strategies or activities your teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing did that helped you connect with other students?
Well, we would talk about things that had happened, and we would brainstorm more topics for me to talk about with my peers. Also, with a counselor, we focused on a role-playing game, which was the unwritten rules of socializing. During this process, we practiced how to respond to people and how to listen to other people's responses.
What was your experience during lunch? What helped make it better with your peers who were able to hear, as well as your deaf peers?
Lunch was all right on good days. I would typically rotate between different tables. One table was with hearing people and another was with deaf people. I tended to sit more often with the deaf table because it was more of a break for me, a visual break from having to watch interpreters and listen during classes. I was exhausted during the day. When I did sit with hearing people, I would typically sit with people who knew of my deafness. And also there was a guy that I would sit with who was on my football and track team that I would sit with. He was a great friend, and he would help me understand what was going on. He would advocate for me as well. So, for example, if a person was not speaking loud enough, he would say, hey, hold on a second, you need to speak louder so that Kobe can understand what's going on. So, sitting with him really helped me be able to socialize during lunch more.
Sounds like a really nice friend. When you look back at high school, what advice would you give to younger students who are just starting high school and who may be struggling to understand different levels of friendship?
My advice for them would be that no matter what happens, to keep your head up. If a person is nice to you and they don't care that you're deaf, that's a good friend there. Those are the people you want to look for. But people who aren't willing to help, people who are teasing or bullying you, that's not the type of person you want to be around. Also, it's important to make connections with staff, especially your teachers and the interpreters. It'll be worth it.
Thank you.
Kobe's experiences show how his understanding of himself changed throughout high school. Even though Kobe was in all general education classes, he benefited from time with a small group of deaf peers and the interactions with his teacher of deaf and hard of hearing. As his self-acceptance increased, so did his confidence to try new experiences. As he shared, it is still challenging for him, but he has a new sense of belonging as he prepares to go to Gallaudet University, a college he has not even considered until he met a recruiter in his junior year.
I didn't know a lot about captioning until I started doing PSEO, which then allowed me to request the college to provide captioning for me. Captioning helped me a lot, especially when I wasn't able to catch the textbook pages for assignments. The option of having captions for classes changed how I felt about asking for help with my hearing loss.
As Kalia shared, when students advocate for more access, then self-confidence increases, which leads to asking for more and then transferring skills to new people that they meet. Later, confidence may transfer to the workplace and/or in post-secondary training and education programs. Students go through a period of developing self-acceptance throughout high school, much like students who are hearing begin to explore their identity and where they fit in society. Participation in after-school activities and community activities allows students to socialize, have shared experiences and belonging, and feel a sense of achievement. However, research has shown the students with hearing loss participate in fewer extracurricular activities than peers. This may be due to students feeling uncertain about dealing with a lack of consistent access in these social situations. Despite the challenges, encouraging student participation in areas of interest has been shown to increase social acceptance and understanding for students. Just like elementary and middle school students are encouraged to participate in social activities such as clubs and sports, the same is true for high school students. Sometimes elementary and middle schools merge into high schools, and students who were solitaires before begin meeting other students for the first time. Hannah shares her experience this past year.
Before high school, I didn't know many people who were hard of hearing, but once I was in Miss Emily's class, I met a lot of new people who could relate to me, and that helped me a lot. It was really cool to be with other people who are like me. Swim team also helped me a lot too because practice starts before school, so when school started, I already knew some people and I had people to talk to. Joining a fall sport helped me because I got to do something I love while meeting new people.
High school is a critical time for the formation of identity and social relationships. Research suggests that participation in after-school and/or community activities provides students with opportunities for socialization, shared experiences, achievement, and distinction. Through their involvement with activities such as sports, drama, volunteering, and clubs, students can learn to master skills that will help them throughout their lives. Active participation in after-school and/or community activities helps students to develop their leadership and decision-making abilities, as well as organizational, time management, and interpersonal communication skills. You just heard from Hannah, who was able to develop soft skills through her involvement in extracurricular experiences. She also practiced her self-advocacy skills by asking for what she needed to access communication within her extracurricular activities. Although some students participate in extracurricular activities during high school, which helps develop their self-advocacy and self-determination skills, Many young adults who are deaf or hard of hearing have not practiced those skills enough and thus struggle upon entering college. To prepare students for a successful transition to post-secondary education and the workforce, it is important that teachers support the development of self-determination and self-advocacy skills throughout high school, with a special emphasis on advocating for students' accessibility needs and exploring all of the options for post-secondary by not limiting them based on their current setting or experience in high school. This is especially true if students are moving from a very familiar place where they may have spent all of their school years and everyone knows their name to a much larger place where they are unknown and everything is new.
When I was planning and looking at colleges, my deaf and hard of hearing teacher made the decision for me about where I would attend college. I knew that there were colleges for deaf people because of the Deaf President Now protest, but it had never been discussed with me in detail. And I was told that the program was not a good fit for somebody like me. I did not understand what that meant, so I ended up enrolling at the University of Milwaukee for 2 years. I think it's important for teachers to share all options with teenagers, even if they think a student may not be interested in colleges or programs for deaf and hard of hearing students. With 88% of students educated in home districts and many as solitaires, people might assume that there's no interest in colleges such as Gallaudet University or the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, NTID. It's important to be mindful not to influence our decisions and color them with our personal opinions or feelings, even if the intentions mean well. That was not the end of my story. After 2 years at the University of Milwaukee, the isolation was too much. I found myself in ASL classes because of the need to connect with the deaf teacher, ASL, the language, and those who signed and wanted to learn American Sign Language in those courses. I'll never forget the day when my deaf professor asked me why I never considered Gallaudet, or RIT, NTID, or CSUN. I was honest and said that I didn't know much about them. The next day, he printed me an application, showed me the websites, and I applied and was accepted to Gallaudet University with a scholarship. This was a tremendous, life-changing experience for me, and one that shaped who I am today. I was able to see him many years later. I thanked him for this, and his words were simple. He said, "Your isolation was so painful for me to see. I knew that you felt lost in life, and there was nothing out there for you in that place." He said, "I knew that Gallaudet would set a different, higher bar with higher expectations, and that you would become the person who you are today." He was absolutely right, and I am forever grateful. While it is certainly not for everyone, at least I had the opportunity and the options to experience it for myself.
Past research has indicated that people who are deaf or hard of hearing often earn less than the general hearing labor force. This may be because our society is sound-oriented, so a significant amount of information is conveyed through verbal interactions. To prepare students for possible situations that may be difficult or seem unfair, sharing stories by adults who have already experienced college and work challenges will help prepare them for what they might face. Jessalyn shares some of the surprising challenges she faced as a young adult after getting her degree.
There were numerous jobs that I applied for and was turned down. Some of the responses were, "We don't work with people like you," or "We don't have the skills to work with people like you." I recall applying for a marketing firm as my bachelor's degree was in communications. I had just completed my internship in marketing with the Baltimore Orioles and moved to Minnesota. I did not inform them that I was deaf before I had the interview. I decided to just show up as I was, but when I showed up, they realized I was deaf, and they let me know that the position required the ability to hear. This was about 12 years ago, but you can imagine the defeat that I felt. Another time I was interested in working at the camp that I grew up attending. When I asked to apply to become the unit director at this camp, which I always thought was very inclusive of deaf people, indicated to me that I needed to hear in order to get this promotion position. I was in shock, and I never returned to the camp. To prove that they were wrong and that I had the ability to work in this type of camp environment, I applied to work at a camp in Minnesota where I became one of the directors. That camp never once used the excuse of having to hear as a reason not to hire me. When I applied to work for the state, I was afraid of being screened out, so I did not indicate that I was deaf on my application. I remember when Human Resources found out that I was deaf, they wondered why I hadn't self-identified as a deaf individual, as it caused hassles with the paperwork. I explained that I had learned the hard way that disclosing that I am deaf could hinder my ability to get the job.
Teachers can support students by acknowledging the very real communication and social challenges that they are facing, and then offer suggestions and role-playing to provide language to navigate situations. Many young adults and high school students find it challenging to network on the job. There aren't any scripts to follow when meeting new people at college or on the job, so continued role-playing is a strategy that is effective even in high school. Also, direct instruction about what behavior is appropriate is one of the most common and effective strategies to teach social behavior, social etiquette, and social pragmatic skills. Sometimes this information comes in the form of a kind but direct boss, as Anne will share.
When I was in graduate school at Gallaudet University, I worked as a graduate assistant for a professor who was also deaf. This is what was one of my first interactions with a deaf adult who also spoke and used more English-based sign language. She was also my boss. As a teenager, I had a job in special education director's office and was the secretary was my boss. She made it clear that I should keep my head down and just come in and work. Therefore, I thought it was meant that the workplace did not include any type of interactions that was social. When I got to Gallaudet, my boss there told me I needed to learn to make connections on the job, to chat with people, get to know them a little bit so that I could get recommendations for future jobs. This made an impression on me that it's important to network since the rest of my jobs have been had through personal connections that I developed in different workplaces. It took a deaf boss to be very direct with me that social connections are important on the job.
Social connections on the job lead to an expansion of acquaintances and friends. This also begins the important process of helping students identify allies, who are people to whom they might turn to for support in work situations. Allies also help reduce isolation, especially when young adults become solitaires again in a different setting. A lot of networking happens on the job, and many young adults miss out on promotions or other opportunities if they do not know how to identify allies and network. Information about levels of friendship that was learned in middle and high school years can be expanded to include recognizing allies and what can be said to network. What-if situations help students to problem solve. Teachers can also teach students to utilize a diagnostic intervention model, which can be a useful tool for student social success. With a diagnostic intervention model, students learn to diagnose a situation to figure out what the problem is. Then they can determine what intervention or changes could be used to provide the social opportunities desired. Teaching students how to determine or diagnose the social problems empowers them to make a decision about what solution or intervention they would like to resolve them. As we end this section for high school students who are preparing for young adulthood, it is important for teams to remember the unique challenges that students have and that there are skills that can be learned to encounter them. Social situations that include role-playing, especially for new situations that will happen in college or the workplace, help to reduce anxiety and to teach language and fine-tune skills. Additional materials and ideas can be found on the resources list linked to this webinar. We hope teachers discover ideas to support social emotional development skills that are unique to students who are deaf or hard of hearing.